It had been 14 years. 14 long, hard years of dedication, sacrifice, and late nights. When I started at this company, I was full of ambition and dreams. I worked my way up from the ground floor, doing everything I could to prove myself. Over the years, I had earned respect from my colleagues and had become a key part of the team. My work ethic, my commitment, and my relentless drive had all paid off, or so I thought. But everything changed the day the new owner took over. The news of the acquisition hit us like a bombshell. We were all uncertain about what it would mean for the future. Would we lose our jobs? Would our roles be restructured? But nothing prepared me for what came next. The meeting was scheduled without much warning. The new owner, Mr. Turner, was a man with a reputation for being cold, calculating, and obsessed with cutting costs. The day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room, expecting the usual corporate updates, perhaps some reassurances about our positions. Instead, what he said next made my blood run cold. "Jessica," he began, his voice monotone as if he were discussing nothing more important than the weather. "We've reviewed the salary structure here, and I think we need to make some adjustments. You've been with us for a long time, but the company needs to stay competitive in the market, so I'm offering you a 40% pay cut starting next month. Consider it a new chapter for you." The words felt like a slap in the face. Sasib Peyosentu, after 14 years of blood, sweat, and tears, I had devoted so much of my life to this company, sacrificed time with my family, and put my heart and soul into my work, and this was the recognition I received. A pay cut. I was stunned, frozen in place for a moment. The room felt like it was spinning, and I could hear the sound of my heartbeat thumping in my ears. How could he think that this was fair? How could anyone think that this was acceptable? I tried to keep my composure, but the anger started to rise in me. The years of loyalty, the countless hours spent building the company, and this was how they valued me? I had a choice to make, to stay silent and accept the offer, or to stand up for myself and walk away. "Mr. Turner," I said, my voice steady but with a quiet fire behind it, "I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept this. 14 years of hard work doesn't warrant a 40% pay cut. I'm not willing to give up my worth for a company that no longer values me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel Mr. Turner's eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. He might have expected me to crumble under the pressure, to bend to his will, but I wasn't that person anymore. I had spent too many years compromising myself for others. "I'm giving my notice," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I'll be leaving the company, effective immediately." His face hardened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of annoyance cross his features, but he didn't argue. There was nothing he could say. He had made his offer, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to let him take away my dignity. Not after all these years. As I walked out of the conference room, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, empowerment. I had just made the hardest decision of my career, but I knew it was the right one. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even a cold-hearted new boss, dictate my worth. I spent the next few days in a fog. On the one hand, I felt a sense of pride. I had made a decision that took courage. I had stood up for my worth, something I hadn't done in a long time. But on the other hand, I felt the weight of uncertainty creeping in. What now? Leaving the company after 14 years was not a small decision. My life had been so tied to my work for so long that the thought of not being part of it anymore left me questioning everything. What was I supposed to do next? I could already hear the whispers in my head. Had I made a mistake? Was I being foolish? Maybe I should have just taken the pay cut. It would have been easier. But as I thought about it, I realized something important. I had spent 14 years building my identity around my job. I had allowed the company to dictate who I was, what I was worth, and how I defined success. I had become so consumed by my career that I had lost touch with who I was outside of it. So I took a step back and asked myself, what do I really want from my life? It was time for me to reclaim my power, not just as an employee, but as a person. I had spent too long thinking that my worth was defined by what others gave me. Now I was going to take control and define it for myself. I couldn't let anyone else hold that power over me anymore. especially not someone who thought they could take 40% of my pay without any regard for what I had given to this company. Over the next few weeks, I took some time off to figure things out. It wasn't easy. The first few days were filled with anxiety and doubt. I had to get used to the idea that my old identity was gone, the one that revolved around my job, the one that I had used to measure my value. But slowly, I started to rediscover pieces of myself that I hadn't realized I'd lost. I remembered things I used to love, things I hadn't made time for in years. I spent time with friends I hadn't seen in months, just enjoying life without the weight of deadlines hanging over me. I spent weekends hiking, reconnecting with nature, and reminding myself of how much joy I used to find in the simple things. But the more I reconnected with myself, the more I realized that I was ready for a new chapter, one that was entirely my own. I wanted something more than just a paycheck. I wanted purpose, freedom, and the chance to build something that reflected my true values. I started brainstorming ideas. I began toying with the idea of starting my own business. It had been a dream of mine for a long time, but I never thought I was brave enough to take the leap. Now, I felt like I had no choice but to dive in. I had learned so much during my time at the company. I had gained valuable experience in leadership, in business operations, and in what it takes to build something meaningful. But I didn't need them to define me anymore. I had the tools I needed to succeed on my own terms. I spent the next few months developing my business plan. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there were moments when I doubted myself. Was I really cut out to be an entrepreneur? Would people take me seriously? But every time the doubts crept in, I reminded myself of why I had left the company in the first place. Because I knew I was worth more. And if I could stand up to my boss and walk away from the paycheck, then I could definitely take this step forward. With every small victory, every idea I fleshed out, every client I secured, I felt more confident. This wasn't just a new career path for me, it was a new life, and I was no longer afraid to take control of it. One evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing my first big client contract, I couldn't help but smile. I had done it. I had stepped away from the familiar and had started something new, something that was all mine. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but in that moment, I felt a deep sense of pride. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had taken back my power, and there was no going back. The first few months after I left the company felt like a whirlwind. I was learning things I had never expected to learn about running a business, from marketing and sales to finances and legalities. Every day brought a new challenge, a new puzzle to solve. But the excitement of being in control of my future far outweighed the fear of the unknown. The more I immersed myself in building my own business, the more I realized just how much I had been underestimated during my time at the company. All those years of hard work, all the late nights, the sacrifices, and yet I had never been valued in the way I deserved. But now, in this new chapter, I had the freedom to make the decisions that aligned with my values, my passion, and my vision. I hired a small team, people I believed in, people who understood the importance of working together to create something bigger than ourselves. I didn't need to have the biggest company in the world, but I wanted a company that felt authentic, where every individual felt valued and important. It wasn't just about making money, it was about creating something meaningful. Slowly but surely, the business began to grow. My clients, initially a little hesitant, began to take notice. The quality of my work spoke for itself, and word spread. I started getting referrals, and soon enough I had built a reputation that was exactly what I had always hoped for, a reputation for hard work, integrity, and results. People started seeing me as an expert in my field, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that I had earned it. There were moments, of course, when doubt crept in. I would get an email from a potential client that didn't pan out, or I'd face a challenge that seemed insurmountable. But each time, I reminded myself why I had made the decision to leave. I was no longer in a position where I had to beg for recognition or shrink myself to fit into someone else's mold. I was in charge now, and that gave me the power to decide my own success. One evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing a proposal for a new client, I paused and looked around my office. There was a sense of calm and satisfaction that I had never felt at the old company. This was my space. This was my dream. I wasn't working under someone else's rules or for a paycheck that didn't reflect my worth. I was doing it for myself. Then something unexpected happened. I received a call from Mr. Turner, the new owner of the company I had left. At first, I wasn't sure if I should answer. What could he possibly want from me after everything that had happened? But curiosity got the best of me, and I picked up the phone. "Jessica, I know things didn't end well," he said, his voice uncharacteristically apologetic. "But I wanted to reach out. I've been watching your progress, and honestly, I'm impressed. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about how I treated you." I was silent for a moment. Mr. Turner, the man who had offered me a pay cut and taken advantage of my loyalty, was actually apologizing? It felt surreal. "I've seen your business take off, and I'm not calling to ask for a second chance or for you to come back," he continued. "I just wanted to acknowledge that you were right. You were more than just an employee, Jessica. You were the backbone of that company, and I can see now that I should have treated you better." His words were unexpected, but I wasn't sure how to respond. For so long I had fought to be recognized, to be seen as more than just a cog in the machine, but hearing him admit it now felt almost hollow. I had already moved on. "Thank you for the acknowledgement, Mr. Turner," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But I'm doing just fine without your validation. I've created something for myself now, something I can be proud of." There was a pause on the other end of the line, but then he replied, "I understand. And I wish you all the best. You've earned it." I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, a sense of calm washing over me. That was it. The chapter with the old company was truly closed. I had found my way, and I didn't need their approval to succeed. As the months passed, my business flourished. There were setbacks, of course, and there were days when it felt like the weight of everything was too much. But the difference was, now I was in control. Every success felt like a small victory, a reminder that I had made the right choice to walk away from my old job and build something from the ground up. I started bringing in more clients, and soon my small team was growing as well. Every time I hired someone, I made sure they shared my values. It wasn't just about filling positions, it was about building a culture where people felt valued, supported, and empowered. I didn't want a company where employees felt like just another number. I wanted a team that was passionate, driven, and invested in the work we were doing. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. There were times when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibilities of being a business owner. The late nights, the constant decisions that had to be made, the pressure to keep pushing forward. I wasn't just building a business, I was building my future, and with that came the pressure to succeed. The fear of failing loomed over me, but I refused to let it control me. One evening, after another long day of meetings and emails, I sat down with Alexander, my fiancé, to unwind. He had been my rock throughout this entire process, and I couldn't have done it without him. His unwavering support had been my anchor when I felt lost, and I was grateful for it every single day. "How's it going?" he asked as he poured us both a glass of wine. I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. "It's going, but it's hard. There are days when I wonder if I'm doing enough. The business is growing, but it feels like there's always something new to worry about." Alexander smiled, sitting down beside me and taking my hand. "You're doing more than enough, Tessa. You've built something incredible from nothing. You've worked harder than anyone I know. And the fact that you're still standing, still moving forward, that says everything." His words comforted me more than I could express. I had spent so many years doubting myself, questioning whether I was good enough. But in that moment, I realized that I was enough. I had always been enough. "You're right," I said softly, looking into his eyes. "I've built something. I've created something, and I'm proud of it." That night, I made a promise to myself. No matter how hard the road ahead might be, I wouldn't let fear hold me back. I wouldn't let the past define me. I had taken the leap, and I had proven to myself that I could succeed. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I had a meeting with a potential investor later that day, and I was ready. This was what I had worked for, I wasn't going to let anything stop me. As I prepared for the meeting, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. I had found my voice, and I was no longer afraid to use it. When I walked into the meeting that afternoon, I was confident, ready to present my vision for the future. The investor listened intently as I spoke, asking questions and taking notes. And when the meeting ended, they expressed interest in partnering with me. It was a step forward, a significant step forward. I walked out of that meeting with a smile on my face, knowing that this was just the beginning. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of the challenges ahead. I had taken control of my future, and nothing could take that away from me. The partnership with the investor was a game changer. It wasn't just the influx of capital that made it significant. It was the validation. Someone else believed in my vision, my idea, and what I was doing. It felt like everything I had been working toward was finally starting to fall into place. But with success came new challenges. Running a business wasn't just about bringing in clients or securing funding. It was about staying ahead, adapting, and constantly learning. Every day I was faced with decisions that would impact the trajectory of my company. There were moments when the pressure felt unbearable, and I questioned whether I could keep up with the demands. But every time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself of how far I had come. I leaned on Alexander more than I ever had before. His unwavering support was a constant source of strength. He wasn't just there for the celebrations. He was there during the hard days, when I felt overwhelmed and uncertain. He'd listen to me vent, help me strategize, and push me to keep going. I couldn't have asked for a better partner. As the business grew, I expanded my team further. I was more selective now, hiring people who not only had the right skills, but who shared my vision. Building a team was more than just filling positions. It was about creating a community of like-minded individuals who were committed to the same values of integrity, hard work, and mutual respect. One day, as we were preparing for another round of pitches to investors, I sat down with my team to go over the strategy. I could see the enthusiasm in their eyes. It was clear they believed in what we were building, and their passion inspired me. As I looked around the room, I realized something important. This wasn't just my dream anymore. It was our dream. We had all built this together. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, I was reminded that success comes with its own set of problems. One of my clients, a high-profile one, had been slow to pay their bills, and it was starting to affect our cash flow. I couldn't afford to let this slip through the cracks. It was a reminder that being in charge meant facing the tough situations head-on. The stress was overwhelming. There were nights when I barely slept, my mind racing with potential solutions. I had to protect the business and my team, but I also had to stand firm in my values. I wasn't willing to compromise on the integrity of my business. After much thought, I decided to take a direct approach with the client. The conversation was tense, but I made it clear that if they didn't meet their obligations, we would have no choice but to part ways. It wasn't an easy decision to make, especially when I knew how much this particular client meant for our reputation. But as I sat in that meeting, I realized something important. I was no longer afraid to make the tough calls. I wasn't going to let anyone walk all over me, not even the biggest clients. In the end, they paid what they owed, and the relationship was salvaged. I learned an invaluable lesson that day. Sometimes you have to be bold to protect what's yours. As I sat back in my office later that evening, I reflected on everything. The business was thriving, but more importantly, I had learned to stand up for myself and my team. The woman who had walked away from a job she had given her all to was not the same woman who sat in that office today. I had come so far, and the road ahead still held challenges. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had built something that was mine, something that I could be proud of, and I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks that followed were filled with even more growth, both personally and professionally. The business continued to expand, and every new challenge seemed easier to face. The lessons I had learned during those early, difficult days helped me make better decisions, and with every victory, I felt more confident in my role as a leader. I had gone from uncertainty to clarity, from fear to action, and I was finally beginning to see the fruit of my labor. But the true transformation wasn't just in my business, it was in me. I had spent so many years worrying about whether I was good enough, about whether I was worthy of success. When I walked away from the company, I had been terrified of what would happen next. But now, as I stood at the helm of a thriving business, I realized something profound. I had always been enough. I had always had the ability to succeed, and all I had to do was believe in myself and take the leap. One evening, as I reviewed our financials with my team, Alexander walked in with a smile on his face. He had been with me every step of the way, and I could see the pride in his eyes. "How's everything looking?" he asked, his voice full of genuine curiosity. "Better than I could have ever imagined," I replied, looking up at him. "We're on track for the best quarter we've ever had." He walked over to my desk and kissed me on the forehead. "You've done it, Tessa. You've built something incredible, and I couldn't be more proud of you." His words meant the world to me. In those moments, I knew that I wasn't just successful in business, I was successful in life. I had created a life for myself that was meaningful, fulfilling, and true to who I was. I was no longer defined by my job title, by my family's expectations, or by anyone else's standards. I was defined by the work I did, the people I surrounded myself with, and the life I had built for myself. Later that night, as we sat down for dinner, I thought about the long road I had traveled, the difficult decisions, the sacrifices, the doubts. All of it had been worth it. I had learned to stand up for myself, to protect my worth, and to never settle for less than I deserved. And as I looked around the table, at the people who had supported me, I realized that this was just the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But now, I knew I was ready for them. I had built a foundation of strength, resilience, and confidence, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The journey wasn't over, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was exactly where I was meant to be, and no one could take that away from me.